In this video, we are going to talk about how to make casts of your action figures and the accessories. Hello and welcome back to Jacob's Toys. My name is Jacob, aka Jacob's Toys. Please do like, share, subscribe and all of those things. All support to the channel is very much appreciated. So, as I said a minute ago, in this video we're going to talk about casting. Now, I've split this video into two pieces, two parts even. The reason being is I want to do the creating the mould for the cast as one video, which is this video, and then there's a second video that will be uploaded that's about actually creating the actual cast. So we've got one video for the mould and one video for the cast. So do check out my channel for that part too. So what is casting? Well, basically it's a very simple technique of creating a silicone mould and then a resin copy of an accessory or an action figure part. And you can do this to a whole range of parts. I mean, I really only use it to do copies of things like heads and accessories and stuff, things that I want multiple things of. So a prime example of one of the things I'm going to cast is this little skull that where's the camera? Little skull that you got with Apocalypse, with the Age of Apocalypse. Now it's a really cool little, let's have a look if I can get it in focus. There we go. It's a really cool little accessory. It's got no kind of hole in it or anything like that. And I just think it'd be really cool to have like multiple versions of this so that I can build up a diorama. So that's one of the things I'm going to cast. And I'm also going to do a Jack Skellington Pumpkin King head because I want to have some pumpkins for some Halloween style photographs, and it's really cool pumpkins. So I'm gonna cast that as well. So in this process, in this video, I'm just going to show you the process that I go through to mix up the silicone to create the mold and how to make those molds sort of effectively, or at least how I do them. And then there's a follow-up video of how to mix up the resin and what you do to kind of create the resin cast as well. So there we go. So I'm going to jump straight into it. I'm going to cut the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. And yeah, so hopefully it's useful. If you've got any questions or anything, then of course pop them in the comments below. And as I said, please do like, share, subscribe, because the support to the channel is very much appreciated. I really do appreciate every single one of you. So without any further delay, let's get straight into that process now.
Okay, so here we go. So this is my workstation, this is my work desk, and this is a kit that I got from a company called MB Fiberglass. And you can see them on eBay and Amazon and stuff like that. And this is essentially a moulding and casting starter kit. So a starter kit that's got just enough stuff to do kind of a few moulds and a few casts, but it's a good one. It's reasonably priced. It's worth picking up if you want to have a little bit of an experiment. In the kit comes a handful of different materials. Now everything that you would need for casting. So you've got two here. These are the resin compounds, so the two parts that make the resin, which is essentially the end product. You've also got some mixing cups and some mixing sticks and some gloves. And you've also got the two-part compound that make the rubber, the kind of silicone mould as well. Now, one thing that I do say is that everything that you need for the casting is here in the kit. So you pick this up, you can make some casts, and you can create some resin replicas of whatever it is that you cast. But they do say that you might want to get some things like glues or modelling clay. I mean, I use a handful of other things, so like paper cups, straws, blue tack, things like that, but I'll show you where I use those. But you don't have to spend a lot of money outside of the kit, and it's reasonably priced. I think you can pick up a kit like this for about £25, £30, and it also comes with a set of instructions as well, so you can pick that kit up and you can follow their instructions. But this is my guide, this is my kind of step-by-step process of how I do action figure heads. So as I said at the beginning, this video is just about creating those rubber silicone molds. So I'm going to crack everything open and then I'm going to show you the process that I do. Now, as I explained in the beginning of the video, I want to definitely do that skull. I want to definitely do the Pumpkin King pumpkin head from Diamond Select, and I've also got a handful of other things that I'm going to try. So what I would say is, because you don't know exactly how much you're going to need for the mould, get a handful of things out so that you can create as many casts as possible. Because once you've mixed the compound, you're not going to have time to then go and get more stuff to put into mould. So I usually get about 4 or 5 things ready. This is the pumpkin head from Diamond Select, and that's going to go in this kind of paper plasticky cup here as well. The skull I'm going to do in a shot glass because it's big enough to cover the area that I need to work with, but also won't use a huge amount of the rubber silicone stuff. I've got this pigeon as well that came with one of the Heroes figures, I think, and this little elf at the back. I'm going to try to cast him. I don't know how successful that's going to be perfectly honest with you. Now with this pumpkin, I can just put a straw in the bottom there, and it creates like a little stand. Now this is important. This is definitely something that's important. You want to have the thing that you're casting off of the ground. You want to have it off of the base of the pot that you're using, because the reason being is that you want the resin to go in and fill the whole mould. Now if I just put the pumpkin head on the cup, at the bottom of the cup, and then poured the rubber in, the bottom of the head would be exposed, so I wouldn't get a full finish. Whereas by using a little straw, putting it there, it creates like a spout, so it creates something for me to pour the resin in, and it's easy to snap off. But you can see that in the next video. Have a look at that in the next video. But there it is, that's set up. So I just put a little bit of blue tack on the bottom, put a little bit of blue tack in the neck peg hole, and I put a little straw. And then I'm going to put that in another cup, just because I can then fill it right to the top, and I haven't got to worry about like an overspill or anything like that. The skull, because as I said, it's not got a neck peg hole, because this is just an accessory. I've not got somewhere to put the straw in, so I want to make sure the straw is the right length. So I'm going to cut this right down so that it's really short, and I'm going to use blue tack to attach it to the back of the skull. Now the nice thing about resin is it's easy to cut, it's easy to sand, so something like a skull, I can sand off any excess that I have and still get that nice round finish. If it had hair, for example, I'm not going to get that. So I can cheat a little bit with this skull, because I could just kind of put the blue tack on the back of the skull, and then I can shave it down and sand it down once I've created the cast. Whereas if it was a regular head sculpt with like a hair or like a headpiece or something, you don't want a huge build up of excess resin on that, because yeah, it'll just look rubbish and it'll create a right headache when you're trying to finish it off. Now I am fortunate because I've still got a couple of plastic straws. These are quite hard to come by now, because obviously everything's gone over to kind of paper and card. You don't have to use straws. I've used everything in the past, but anything that's going to create a nice spout, a nice kind of place for you to pour that resin in, is fine. Now having a look at the skull, that works fine. You want to make sure that there's enough room above it as well as below it, so that when you fill it up, I'm actually going to move that around a little bit, because you want to make sure that there's enough room for the silicone to go above it, because you don't want it too thin in one particular place, because otherwise that's going to cause you issues further down the line. So I've just changed the angle there, but it's made it even higher, so let me cut that down a bit more. Now one thing I would say is you can buy these materials in larger quantities. Because this is a starter kit, I know that it pretty much balances out. So I know that I've got enough of the pink compound to go with the rubber mix. I can't remember the technical names, I'm going to have to look those up, but I've got the right amount. Whereas if I bought a bigger pack, you get a bigger portion of each one, so you need to kind of measure it out. But it's basically a 1:10 ratio, so for every 10 parts of the bigger one, you use 1 part of the pink one. But I'll talk a bit more about that when I mix it. But here's the skull. I've cut the straw right down, and I've put the blue tack on the back of the skull, so that that's the kind of biggest surface for me to sand and cut and whatnot once I've actually made the cast. So there he is, he's sitting in the shot glass quite nicely. Nice thing about the shot glass as well is it's clear. I do prefer clear cups. I just grabbed these ones because they were cheap, and I had them. I had a lot of them. Now I'm going to try to put the elf thing from Diamond Select in this white pepper pot, just because it's nice and small, it's nice and thin, but it's big enough to kind of surround the figure. I'm just hoping that the top of his head doesn't pop out the top. Now, contradicting what I said a minute ago, I'm not going to put this guy on a straw. Reason being is I'm going to use his legs as the spout, because if I've got excess resin on his feet, I can then cut that down to the right shape and the right size. So to save space, I'm just going to use his legs. Now I've never tried to cast an entire figure in its entirety like this, so this is a bit of an experiment for me. Heads I've done. I'm confident that skull and that pumpkin will come out perfect. This particular elf, I'm not 100% sure, and it's going to use a lot of the silicone as well. So you can see the hat there is the same level as the pot. So I'm going to have to maybe put him in a cup, which annoyingly is going to use a lot more of my mold making equipment. So I'm probably only going to be able to do the skull, the pumpkin and the elf. But I do want to try it, so I'm kind of sacrificing what materials I do have just to try it, because if I can pull it off, if I can make a full cast of this little figure, that would be really cool. So let's see how we get on. So there he is, he's in there. He's going to sit in there quite nicely. Let me just get a bit of blue tack for his feet, and then I'll put him in. But yeah, so okay, I'm only going to end up with 3, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But have more available, because I would always set up maybe, I mean, for this particular measurement, I would set up 4 or 5 things that I was wanting to cast. See, he's going to use a lot of silicone, you can see that. But I'd always set up maybe 4 or 5 things that I want to cast in order of how important I want to cast them. So the skull and the pumpkin are my priority here. I definitely want to get those done for some kind of horror and Halloween style setups. The elf is an experiment, so he's probably 3rd on my list. And then I've got another head sculpt over here, and I've got this little pigeon thing from Heroes. So they're my kind of, if I've got enough left over, I'll do a cast of those. But I'm going to prep them anyway, because you don't know how much silicone is going to be used. The real main kind of rule of thumb here is that whatever it is that you're casting, make sure the silicone goes a couple of millimeters above the tip of the thing that you're casting. So the skull there that you can see in the shot glass, I would want to fill the entire shot glass up so that it is completely encased in rubber. Now, people often say, do you need some kind of release agent, or do you need some kind of protective kind of Vaseline or something on your accessories or on your heads? And you don't, believe it or not. It doesn't affect the paint, it doesn't affect the actual condition of anything at all. You can do this completely risk-free, and you haven't got to do any kind of prep work in regards to covering it up with anything. So that's a really cool thing. I remember the very first time that I cast something, I was so nervous because I had a head sculpt in a cup similar to this, and I was so nervous that it was just going to kind of melt the plastic, or it's going to take all the paint off or something like that. But it doesn't actually do any of that. All it does is create a mould of the thing in the cup. So there we go. So don't worry, do this kind of risk-free. I've even cast things that I've painted as well, so that also works. So yeah, you can do this pretty much risk-free. So let me set this pigeon up, and then we'll get on to actually mixing the rubber and making the moulds, which is quite fun. Now, the other thing to note as well is the more delicate something is, the harder it's going to be to cast, because if you think about the internal elements of the mould, this skull, for example, it's quite a solid shape, it's quite a big space, so it'll be easy to pour the resin in and it will fill it up. Same as the pumpkin as well. The elf thing that I'm trying to do is quite intricate. It's got very thin parts, it's got arms and legs and whatnot, so the resin's going to have a difficult time kind of getting into that mould, whereas with the head sculpts and the skull and the pumpkin, it will go in quite quickly. So if you're trying to cast things like weapons or head sculpt with really intricate kind of curling or flowing hair, you're going to have a hard time. I would always go for something more solid, something like a skull, something like an Iron Man helmet or a Stormtrooper helmet or something like that. You'll be able to cast no problem at all. Anything that's a little bit more intricate or that's got thin pieces, you could have a bit of a difficult time. Now, this is the fun part. This is the creating the rubber mold. So in this tub here, you've got the rubber part, and then in the, I don't even know the technical names of it. It's really bad, isn't it? I really should have kind of looked up the technical names of it, but I can't actually remember. But it's in the tub is like a silicone rubber, and in the red tub is like the hardening agent, the thing that makes it set, if you like. So yeah. There we go. So you do this to a 1 to 10 scale. So for 10 parts of the rubber mould, 1 part of the hardening agent. But because this is a starter kit, I've got the right quantity. So I'm not going to measure it out. I'm literally just going to go for it. So this is always really satisfying. It comes out like PVA glue. They do give you gloves. I don't wear gloves for this particular part because I'm a bit of a rebel. But no, I'm only joking. I don't wear gloves for this particular part because it's not as messy. I definitely wear gloves when I'm using the resin, but for this particular part it's not really that messy. What I would say though is, unless you're working on a workspace, unless you've got like a workbench like I'm working here, I would put something down, whether that's a board or a bit of newspaper or something like that, because if you get any of this on the side, it will stain the side, it will leave a mark. As you can see, there's loads of little marks and paint marks and stuff all over my desk, but that's because I do things like this just straight onto the desk. But if you're doing this at like a dining room table, or doing this in an area of your house that you live or you use, definitely put something down, because if you get a little bit of this on it, it's going to be an absolute nightmare to try to get off. So I do apologise, my hand is just completely in the way there, but essentially all I'm doing is scraping out all the excess. I want to use absolutely every last scrap of this, because I'm going to need as much as possible to do these moulds, and I want it to go as far as possible. I want to make as many moulds as I can out of this. Now, I'm confident that if I wasn't doing the elf, I could pretty much get away with doing all of the others. So I think last time I did this, it measures out about 2 cups, a cup and a half. No, I think it's about 2 cups. These white cups here you end up with. So you can measure it out. I mean, if you're really over the top and kind of want to be precise, you've got a measuring facility here on the side of the glass. So you could fill it with water and then fill all of your moulds with water, or see how much each of those are, like measure out the volume of each of the cups, and then you'll know exactly which ones to do. Be careful not to spill any of this red stuff, because it is quite it does stain. So yeah, so then once you've got that in, you've got about 2 minutes, I think it is about 2.5 minutes before it starts to kind of set, before it starts to cure. Is that the right word? So you want to mix it all up. You want to make sure that you get all of it in. Be really gentle with your mixing, but make sure all of that rubber compound mixes with the pink, with the red, and it's going to give you like a pinky coloured kind of finished product. So don't whisk too hard. You don't want to get loads of air bubbles in it. If you get loads of air bubbles in it, then essentially that could mess up your casts, because that will then create an empty space within your cast, and then you'll end up with a skull with like a ball on his head. So try not to get too many air bubbles in it, but you want to get this kind of pinky coloured finish, if you like. So there we go. So that's what I'll try to show you the best I can. Just going to move over the pumpkin. Now, awkwardly, I've got the camera on the wrong side here, so I will try to show you if I can. But what you want to do is, don't just pour this in. Don't just dump it on top of the head within the cup, because what you'll do is you'll knock that over, and then it'll be leaning against the side, and then you won't get a full cast. So I usually use the mixing stick to kind of spoon it out and almost kind of like direct it so that it goes down the side and underneath, and then comes up underneath the head, and then just put a little bit on top. Let me try to show you here with this skull. So I'm going all the way around the sides, letting it kind of go underneath. I'm going to create like a base, if you like, underneath it. And you can already see I've already got it on the desk, so that's already going to be a stain on my desk to add to the other stains that are already there. Yeah, so just carefully spooning it in, and then once you've got a little bit underneath it, you can kind of go a little bit mad and pour it in. And I always fill it right to the top of these shot glasses, just to ensure that absolutely everything's covered, and it creates a nice little miniature mould for you. So there we go, that's that one done, and that's the pumpkin done. And I think I've pretty much got enough left now for this elf as predicted. So I'm going to pour all this in as well, doing the same thing, just scooping it in so that it goes down the side of the cup and doesn't dislodge the setup that I've created. So unfortunately I'm not going to get around to doing this pigeon, and I'm not going to get around to doing this head. So as predicted, what, you got half a cup there with the pumpkin in it, you've got a full cup here with the elf in it, and then you've got a shot glass. So that's, you know, just under a cup and a half, so a cup and 3/4, so just shy of 2 cups worth of the rubber silicone stuff. So there we go. So just putting that in there like that, and it's just the process really, just making sure that you're covering all of the thing that you're casting. You don't want to leave any exposed. And as I said before, I'm going to struggle a little bit with this elf, because he's got that really long hat on, and you want to make sure that there's a decent amount, at least a couple of millimeters of the silicone above the tip of the thing that you're casting. So as I showed you earlier with the skull, you can see there that I went higher than the tip of the skull so that the whole thing is covered. And it is quite a weird process when you do it for the first time, because you're pouring this kind of pink liquid on your action figure accessories or heads, and if I took it out now, trying to wash it all off would be really painful. It would be a really long process, and I don't even know how that would work. But when you leave it to set, you can just pop them out, which is really quite funny. But yeah, so do it without any fear. Don't fear it. Just go for it, and let me know. Let me know in the comments what things you're going to cast, or what things you have successfully casted. Casted, is that the right word? But I'm no expert by any means. This is just something that I've been doing for quite some time now with my action figures. When I've wanted like an accessory or something that I wanted multiple of, but they were harder to source. So, for example, these skulls. There's no way that I was going to go out and buy 50 of these Age of Apocalypse figures just for the skull, because that's ridiculous. Whereas if I do a cast of it, I can make loads of them, I can paint them how I want, I can glue them together, I can do anything. And once I've got the cast, I've got the cast. And once the head is out of the cast, that's the last that I need it. So it can go back on my figures, it can go back on my shelf. That is the last I need it. And the mould will last for quite a while. I got about 20-25 casts out of something before the mold starts to kind of deteriorate a little bit. I find that the resin kind of sticks to the inside a little bit more after that many, but we'll see how many I can get out of these, because they're quite simple. Apart from the elf, the pumpkin and the skull are quite simple and quite straightforward. But there we go. So I'm just scraping off all the excess just to make sure that I get the absolute most out of the pot. And make sure that I get all of it in. The pumpkin's well covered, the skull is well covered, and let's just get this elf well covered. But that is pretty much the whole process of creating a silicone mould for your accessories or your head sculpts. It's quite straightforward. I was pleasantly surprised when I did it for the first time. I thought there was going to be a lot more to it than that. Couple of pointers is definitely make sure that you have a good spout, have something that's long enough and also wide enough that you can pour that resin down. You don't want something like a toothpick width, because you're just not going to get that resin in. So I found that straws are a good one because they create a nice cylinder spout, and you want to make sure that nothing's touching the sides. So here they are. Here are the three that I managed to do. As you can see, I've made a right mess of my desk. I've added a few extra stains there, but if this was my dining room table, my wife would kill me. So make sure if you're doing it on your dining room table or anything like that, you are putting something down and covering it up. But here they are. There's a couple of bubbles on the top there. That's just where I was spooning out those last few bits. But there we go, 3 moulds. Just got to leave those to set. Now it does recommend that you leave it for up to 3 days. I've read that somewhere online, but because of the quantities we're using, it should be fine by tomorrow. So I'd leave it like 24 hours and I should be able to use these as moulds, but you can leave them as long as you want. Couple of days if you want to be absolutely sure, but definitely at least 24 hours. So let's fast forward.
The next day.
And here we are the next day, and this is the exciting bit because they are now hard. Now, as I said, they do recommend leaving it kind of 3 days, but the quantity that I've used here is very small, so 24 hours was absolutely fine. So what you do is get a sharp knife, and obviously be careful with knives, you don't want to cut yourself, and just make a cut so that you kind of pull the plastic away, but it won't be stuck to the cup. So the same as it won't be stuck to your action figure heads, it's not going to be stuck to the cup. So you can just peel it off, just peel it away, and it should just pop out absolutely fine. There we go. And there it is. There's a couple of little excess bits here that are just on the side of the cup. Just take those off as well. But yeah, essentially it's rubber. It's now a big rubber lump. But inside there we know that we've got the Jack Skellington pumpkin head. So I'm really excited for this one. Really excited to see how the cast turn out. Just peel this plastic away, peel this cup away. Remember I put this in another cup, so I double cupped it if you like. There's the blue tack that I used to stick the straw up. It's well and truly wedged in there, so but even the blue tack is still perfectly normal. You could take that bit of blue tack out now and use it the same as you could have beforehand. So the actual rubber silicone liquid didn't even affect blue tack. With these clear shot glasses, because they're harder plastic, it's much easier. I just make a little crack on the rim and then the whole thing just snaps away, and I can just crack it like a nut. Just pull it out and pull the thing out, and there we go. There's the blue tack again. And I really like the aesthetics of these little shot glass ones. I think they're really cool. And this is the Elf. Now this is definitely going to be the biggest and most ambitious one out of the three, without a doubt. So again, just cutting the plastic, and I think I'll take the middle cup out, cut the plastic rim and just peel it away, and it comes off. And you can see it, you know, completely makes the shape of the cup. You've got all the rim, the rim of the the ridges of the cup, and you've got all the writing on the bottom as well. But it, you know, the silicone gets into everything, so make sure there are no cracks in these cups, because otherwise it will seep out a little bit. Now, for aesthetic reasons, I always kind of pull all these excess bits off, just so that I've got a nice solid mould, and naturally you turn them up the other way. Now what we've got here is, because the cups are now upside down, once everything's out, the little blue tack parts is what will be our spout. So that's where we're going to pour the resin in. Now I get a, what's it, like a pen knife? It's not a pen knife, is it like a utility knife? And just kind of pick this blue tack out. Now it won't be stuck to anything, so once you've kind of got it, it should just pop out nice and easy. Yeah, there we go. So it just pops out nice and easy, and you can see there is the straw. Then you want to get your Stanley knife. You want to get your craft knife, and you want to just make a slice all the way down, and you should be able to feel the plastic of the head. So just kind of go all the way down to the head, and then just slice to the side. Be really careful, because the resistance on this rubber is different depending on the thickness of the rubber. And then you want to make, just sort of keep cutting away, just like that, and it will just, if you put a bit of resistance to it like I did there, holding it open, it will just kind of tear, if you like, but a clean tear. And then you want to make another slice as well on the other side, directly opposite it. Make sure that these lines correspond, because it's you're going to need that to get your things out. And you open it up, and you just push with your fingers from behind, and the head should just pop out. Now I've got a couple of little bits of rubber stuck there, just where I've missed it, but that's because we have blue tack and then the straw. So cut them out of the way and just push, and it will just pop out. There we go. And you're not going to damage the, I really flew out there, you're not going to damage the mould at all. But if you have a look in there, you can see all the details of the teeth, and you can see the nice wide spout that we've got at the top as well. So for me personally, that's a really clean, good mould. I think that's come out really well. I'm really excited to see how the cast take to that, how the resin takes to that, but I think that's a really clean mould. And if I just take the blue tack off and the straw off, you can see here absolutely zero damage to the head whatsoever. There's nothing, there's a little bit of excess rubber on there, but I can just pick that off. Is it rubber? Is it part of the, I think it might actually be part of the plastic. But yeah, absolutely nothing on there. Give it a little rub off, and then if there is anything, then it will come off. But yeah, absolutely fine. No damage to that whatsoever. That can go straight back on my figure. Now the skull, I'll do the skull next on the shot glass, and you just want to repeat the same process. So just get the tool to pick out the blue tack, and that should just come out nice and easy, because again it's not stuck to anything, so pops out really easy. Put that aside, and then get your craft knife and create one slice. I cannot stress enough, I've cut myself so many times with these when I first started doing them. Make sure your fingers are well out of the way, because it's a bit misleading. The resistance in this rubber is very different depending on the thickness of the rubber. So closer to the item inside, it will be a lot easier to cut through, but the thicker the rubber gets, the harder it is to cut through it, and you can really kind of do some damage. Cut all the way down to where the skull is, or where the head is. Just take that straw, get that out of the way. Stuck to my finger now because of the blue tack. All the way down. Now, it doesn't matter how far down you cut, as long as you don't cut it in two. You don't want two pieces, because then you haven't got mould, you've got essentially two moulds, and that's not going to work with a liquid resin. So make sure, I always cut down to about 50% of the way down. You can get things like rubber bands or whatever to hold the mould together once you pour the resin in, but that heat comes out really smooth, and you can see all the details in there. That again is a really good mould. But yeah, you can get rubber bands to kind of wrap around them to kind of keep them in place, but I find that you don't really need to unless it's something really big. But that's the skull. He is done, and he is the elf. Now, why this was set in overnight, I was thinking quite a lot about it, and I really am not confident about this one as a mould whatsoever. The main reason being is that I've used the feet as the spout, as the way of pouring the resin in, and the legs on this thing are really thin, so I've kind of contradicted my own advice by using something that's really thin, and I think I probably would have been better if I had kind of done it on his back, like maybe made a lower down mould and laid him on his back. So I might try it again in the future, but I don't think this mould is going to work. I think through trial and error I've realised that I've done it the wrong way round here, but I am going to try just for the sake of showing you what can go wrong, or I might surprise myself. I might put the resin in and it might work perfectly, but I don't think it's going to. I've kind of created a few issues for myself, one of which being the piece in between the legs. So I'm going to have to cut that as well, and I think that's going to cause a problem when it comes to the resin. So yeah, I'm not overly confident about this. I was thinking a lot about it last night, but anyway, with all the arms and the legs and stuff, there's a lot of issues. And also I'm pouring it in from the bottom here, which is the bottom of his feet, which means that I'm trying to get it to go up into his arm as opposed to all drop down. So I'm also working against gravity here, but I am going to try to cast this one again, but I'm going to do it using a straw on his back and put him in like a square container instead. So let me fast forward the video and get to the end of this. So I did meet a lot of issues. It was all the little bits getting under his arm and in between his legs and everything like that. So 100% after cutting him out, I'm definitely going to retry this, but I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to set it up. It's a really detailed mould still, so I'm going to try to pour some resin in there, and if it doesn't work, then nothing lost, nothing gained. But I've definitely learned a way not to do it, and I think I will try a different way, because I'd really like to get a cast of this little guy. I think it'd be quite cool. With my Nightmare Before Christmas setup, it would be cool to have a little troop of them, and they're not that difficult to paint either by the looks of them. So anyway, there are the 3 moulds. So that's it. I've got these 2 that I definitely know are going to work. I've got this one that I'm not 100% sure is going to work, but that's it. I hope this was useful. Of course, put any questions in the comments below. I do hope this video was useful. Check out my channel for part 2 where we do the resin cast. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you soon.